Lincoln's apparently radical change of mind about his war power to emancipate slaves was caused by the escalating scope of war, which convinced him that any measure to weaken the Confederacy and strengthen the Union war effort was justifiable as a military necessity.
A young man from a small provincial town, a man without independent wealth, without powerful family connections, and without a university education, moved to London in the late 1580s and, in a remarkably short time, became the greatest playwright not of his age alone, but of all time. How was this achievement of magnitude made? How did Shakespeare become Shakespeare? Tesla actually worked for Edison early in his career. Edison offered to pay him the modern equivalent of $1 million to fix the problems he was having with his DC generators and motors. Tesla fixed Edison's machines, and when he asked for the money he was promised, Edison laughed him off and had this to say, "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor."
Akimbo. This must be one of the odder-looking words in the language, and puzzles us in part because it doesn't seem to have any relatives. What's more, it is now virtually a fossil word, until recently almost invariably found in arms akimbo, a posture in which a person stands with hands on hips and elbows sharply bent outward, one signaling impatience, hostility, or contempt. The Grand Canyon is 277 miles long, up to 80 miles wide, and attains a depth of over a mile. While the specific geologic processes and timing that form the Grand Canyon are the subject of debate by geologists, recent evidence suggests the Colorado River established its course through the canyon at least 17 million years ago.
The problem begins with the alphabet itself, building a spelling system for English, using letters that come from Latin, despite the two languages not sharing exactly the same set of sounds, is like building a playroom using an IKEA office set.
Modern buildings have to achieve certain performance requirements, at least to satisfy those of building codes, to provide a safe, healthy, and comfortable environment. However, these conditioned environments demand resources in energy and materials, which are both limited in supply, to build and operate. This finding is understandable in certain cases, in spite of its high significance. That is because energy efficiency of building operation just represents a single aspect of sustainability.
In the fast-changing world of modern healthcare, the job of a doctor is more and more like the job of chief executive. The people who run hospitals and physicians' practices don't just need to know medicine. They must also be able to balance budgets, motivate a large and diverse staff, and make difficult marketing and legal decisions.
Cheerful sunny yellow is an attention getter, while it is considered an optimistic color. People lose their tempers more often in yellow rooms, and babies will cry more. It is the most difficult color for the eye to take in, so it can be overpowering if overused. Yellow enhances concentration, hence its use for legal paths. It also speeds metabolism.
The brain is divided into two hemispheres, called the left and right hemispheres. Each hemisphere provides a different set of functions, behaviors, and controls. The right hemisphere is often called the creative side of the brain, while the left hemisphere is the logical or analytic side of the brain.
Introvert, or those of us with introverted tendencies, tends to recharge by spending time alone. They lose energy from being around people for long periods of time, particularly large crowds. Extroverts, on the other hand, gain energy from other people. Extroverts actually find their energy is sapped when they spend too much time alone. They recharge by being social.
Using more than 50 interviews, award-winning writer Danny Danziger creates a fascinating mosaic of the people behind New York's magnificent Metropolitan Museum of Art, from the aristocratic, acerbic director of the museum, Philip Don Montebello, to the creators who have a deep knowledge and passionate appreciation of their collections, from the security guards to the philanthropists who keep the museum's financial life blood flowing. The tsunamis could provide crucial information about the habitability of ancient Mars. The first one occurred when the planet must have been relatively warm and amenable for life, because it carved out backwash channels as it returned to the sea. By contrast, the planet had become much cooler by the time the second tsunami hit. For centuries, Atlantis has been one of the Western world's favorite legends, a tantalizing blend of fantasy and mystery. Stories tell of a rich and glorious empire that was lost to the sea, where some hope its ruins still lie, waiting to be discovered. In the Middle Ages, the design and use of flags were considered a means of identifying social status. Flags were therefore the symbols not of nations, but of the nobility. The design of each flag resembled the devices on the noble's coat of arms, and the size of the flags was an indication of how high the owner stood in the nobility. But they did find something that had a much bigger impact on wildlife: habitat quality. The best predictor of wildlife abundance was not human activity, but factors like forest connectivity, nearby housing density, and the amount of adjacent agriculture. The results were published in the Journal of Applied Ecology.
Australians do speak English. However, for some tourists and travelers, it can be difficult to understand the slang. Also, the links between Australian and American English were seen to be very tenuous. At least some colloquialisms in Australian English do not exist in other types of English.
Trump has threatened to declare China a currency manipulator, but experts say he has little legal or economic basis to take such a step. He has also threatened to impose a tariff of up to 45% on Chinese imports if Beijing doesn't behave a move that could lead to a trade war and damage the economies of both nations. By beginning so early, he knows that he has plenty of time to do thoroughly all the work he can be expected to do. All his work having been finished in good time, he has a long interval of rest in the evening before the timely hour when he goes to bed. After a sound night's rest, he rises early next morning in good health and spirits for the labors of a new day. Legal writing is usually less discursive than writing in other humanity subjects, and precision is more important than variety. Sentence structure should not be too complex. It is usually unnecessary to make extensive use of adjectives or adverbs, and consistency of terms is often required. In multilingual countries, co-mixing, the use of more than one variety in the same utterance or sentence, and code-switching, the use of different languages or varieties between sentences, is common and natural. Despite its frequency, or perhaps because of it, some scholars and self-appointed guardians of linguistic morality view both co-mixing and code-switching as a sign of linguistic deficiency.
The preparation of abstracts is an intellectual effort, requiring general familiarity with the subject. To bring out the salient points of an author's argument calls for skills and experience. Consequently, a considerable amount of qualified manpower that could be used to advantage in other ways must be diverted to the task of facilitating access to information.
The definition of a disaster varies by organization. Various entities have different pain thresholds that define when an incident becomes a disaster. A bank, for example, will have different criteria than a poison control hotline. With this factor in mind, any organization should begin the process of implementing first alert and response teams after it has completed a business impact analysis.
A unique characteristic of online shopping environments is that they allow vendors to create retail interfaces with highly interactive features. One desirable form of interactivity from a consumer perspective is the implementation of sophisticated tools to assist shoppers in their purchase decisions by customizing the electronic shopping environment to their individual preferences. Certainly, one of the important values of literature is that it nourishes our emotional lives. An effective literary work may seem to speak directly to us, especially if we are ripe for it. The inner life that good writers reveal in their characters often gives us glimpses of some portion of ourselves. We can be moved to laugh, cry, tremble, dream, ponder, shriek, or rage with a character by simply turning the page instead of turning our lives upside down.
Although Botswana's economic outlook remains strong, the devastation that AIDS has caused threatens to destroy the country's future. In 2001, Botswana had the highest rate of HIV infection in the world. With the help of international donors, it launched an ambitious national campaign that provided free antiviral drugs to anyone who needed them. And by March 2004, Botswana's infection rate had dropped significantly.
Beauty contests, whether it's Miss Universe or Miss Teen International, are demeaning to women and out of sync with the times. Opponents say that they're nothing more than symbols of decline. Since Australians Jennifer Hawkins and Lauren Eagle were crowned Miss Universe and Miss Teen International respectively, there has been a dramatic increase in interest in beauty pageants in this country.
There is no single method of learning that guarantees success. How we learn that depends on many different factors, and what works best for you will not necessarily be the same as the approach used for the other students, even they study the same course. We are all unique as learners, although some patterns emerge from any groups of students. The one-year program of the Master in Global Management is designed only for those who have the graduate degree in the thesis. It increases the temporary skill of new managers in an international capacity, something that recruiters are looking for more and more. At the beginning of each fiscal year, funds are allocated to each state account in accordance with the university's financial plan. Funds are allocated to each account by objects of expenditure. Account managers are responsible for ensuring that adequate funds are available in the appropriate object before initiating transactions to use the funds.
The beginning of the 21st century will be remembered not for military conflicts or political events, but for a whole new age of globalization, a flattening of the world. The explosion of advanced technologies now means that suddenly knowledge pools and resources have connected all over the planet, leveling the playing field as never before.
Although it hails from a remote region of the Western Himalayas, this plant now looks entirely at home on the banks of English rivers. Brought to the UK in 1839, it quickly escaped from Victorian gardens and colonized river banks and damp woodlands. Now it is spreading across Europe, New Zealand, Canada, and the US. Along with customary classes on subjects such as finance, accounting, and marketing, today's MBA students are enrolling on courses for environmental policy and stewardship. Indeed, more than half of business schools require a course in environmental sustainability or corporate social responsibility, according to a survey of 91 U.S. business schools published in October 2005.
The physical location of a restaurant in the competitive landscape of the city has long been known as a major factor in its likely success or failure. Once restaurants are established in such environments, they can do little about their location. All they can do is work to improve customer access to their premises. Restaurateurs often do this by engaging in battles with local authorities about car parking. Thus, a country might possess a sizable rural population, but have an economic system in which the interests of the voters were predominantly related to their incomes, not to their occupations or location. And in such a country, the political system would be unlikely to include an important agrarian party.
While blue is one of the most popular colors, it is one of the least appetizing. Food researchers say that when humans search for food, they learn to avoid toxic or spoiled objects, which are often blue, black, or purple. When food dyed blue is served to study subjects, they lose appetite.
Augustus was given the powers of an absolute monarch, but he presented himself as the preserver of republican traditions. He treated the Senate or State Council with great respect, and was made consul year after year. He successfully reduced the political power of the army by retiring many soldiers, but giving them land or money to keep their loyalty.
The core of the problem was the immense disparity between the country's productive capacity and the ability of people to consume. Great innovations in productive techniques during and after the war raised the output of industry beyond the purchasing capacity of U.S. farmers and wage earners.
Pluto lost its official status as a planet yesterday when the International Astronomical Union downsized the solar system from 9 to 8 planets. Although there had been a passionate debate at the IAU General Assembly meeting in Prague about the definition of a planet and whether Pluto met the specifications, the audience greeted the decision to exclude it with applause.
Once most animals reach adulthood, they stop growing. In contrast, even plants that are thousands of years old continue to grow new needles and new wood and produce cones and new flowers, almost as if parts of their bodies remain forever young. The secrets of plant growth are regions of tissue that can produce cells that later develop into specialized tissues.
If bonus or incentive pay schemes work so well for senior executives and bankers, why does everyone not get them? After all, many jobs involve making important decisions or taking risks. Is there anything about corporate decisions and financial risks that makes these categories of work special in terms of how they need to be incentivized and rewarded?
How quickly is the world's population growing? In the United States and other developed countries, the current growth rate is very low. In most developing countries, the human population is growing at a rate of nearly 3 people per second. Because of this bustling growth rate, the human population is well on its way to reaching 9 billion within lifetime.
The diversity of human language may be compared to the diversity of the natural world. Just as the demise of plant species reduces genetic diversity and deprives humanity or potential medical and biological resources, so extinction of language takes with it a wealth of culture, art, and knowledge.
As to the Industrial Revolution, one cannot dispute today the fact that it has succeeded in inaugurating in a number of countries a level of mass prosperity which was undreamt of in the days preceding the Industrial Revolution. But, on the immediate impact of the Industrial Revolution, there were substantial divergences among writers.
The uniquely center flavor of vanilla is second only to chocolate in popularity on the world's palate. It's also the second most expensive spice after saffron. But highly labor-intensive cultivation methods and the plant's temperamental life cycle and propagation mean production on a global scale is struggling to keep up with the increasing demand for the product.
Have you ever pictured a world without light? Just think how much we rely on man-made light sources in our lives. Without engineers, we wouldn't be able to live the way we do. No street lights, no TV, no computer display, no house lights. Engineers design and build all these things. And they also design, build, and run the electricity systems that power all these light sources.
A national study into fraud by bookkeepers employed at small and medium-sized businesses has uncovered 65 instances of theft in more than 5 years, with more than $31 million stolen. Of the cases identified by the research, 56 involved women and 9 instances involved men. However, male bookkeepers who defrauded their employer stole 3 times, on average, the amount that women stole.
If the dream is to turn this palm fringe corner of Hainan into a tourist trap comparable to Florida's balmy Space Coast, there is still a lot to do. Several idle building sites suggest that some investors have gambled rashly. Signs have been taken down from a patch of scrub that was once earmarked for an amusement center.
How do we imagine the unimaginable if we are asked to think of an object, say a yellow tulip? A picture immediately forms in our mind's eye. But what if we try to imagine a concept, such as the square root of a negative number?
In most animals, the brain is located in the head, protected by a skull and close to the primary sensory apparatus of vision, hearing, taste, and olfaction. In humans, it is an organ of thought. While all vertebrates have a brain, invertebrates have either a centralized brain or collections of individual ganglia.
Unlike the iconic Nazca lines, most of which are only visible from overhead, the older Paracas glyphs were laid down on hillsides, making them visible to villages below. The two cultures also pursue different artistic subjects. Nazca lines most often consist of lines or polygons, but many of the newfound Paracas figures depict humans.
Twitter, a social network, will reportedly join forces with Bloomberg, a media company, to produce a 24-hour video news service. Twitter has made strides in adding users in recent quarters, but not in boosting profits. Jack Dorsey, a co-founder who recently returned as CEO, introduced limited live video broadcasts at the site, which were seen by 45 million unique viewers in the first quarter of 2017.
The World Health Organization said an experimental malaria vaccine will be tested on more than 750,000 children in Ghana, Kenya, and Malawi next year. The disease causes more than 400,000 deaths annually. How the vaccine is implemented will be key to its success. It must be administered 4 times, with the final dose 18 months after the third.
When countries assess their annual carbon dioxide emissions, they count up their cars and power stations, but bushfires are not included, presumably because they are deemed to be events beyond human control. In Australia, Victoria alone sees several 100,000 hectares burn each year. In both 2004 and the present summer, the figure has been over 1 million hectares.
Teenage girls are continuing to outperform boys in English, while the gender gap in achievements in math and science has almost disappeared. The figures show that last year 80% of 14-year-old girls reached at least the expected level 5 in English, compared with 65% of boys. But in math, the girls are just 1% ahead of boys, while in science, the difference is 2%.
It isn't rare for private equity houses to hire grads fresh out of business school, he said, but 9 times out of 10, the students who nab these jobs are the ones who have private equity experience under their belt before even starting their MBA program.
The Founding Fathers established constitutional protections for the press because they understood that leaving the watchdog function to partisan politicians wouldn't necessarily serve the public interest. Both sides have too many incentives to preserve the status quo and ignore problems that elude quick fixes. Weakness in electronics, auto, and gas station sales dragged down overall retail sales last month, but excluding those 3 categories, retailers enjoyed healthy increases across the board, according to government figures released Wednesday. Moreover, December sales numbers were also revised higher. The best comparison is likely a magnetar, a young neutron star with a powerful magnetic field, the researchers said. Magnetars also produce bright X-ray flares. While magnetars are thought to be young stars, the 2 flaring objects in this study reside near elliptical galaxies, which contain older stars. So the objects are likely too old to be magnetars, the researchers said. Psychologist Sahao Takagi, a graduate student at Kyoto University in Japan, strolls into one of Japan's many cat cafes. These establishments allow customers to pay an hourly fee for the chance to cuddle some cats. They're popular in Japan because so many apartment buildings forbid pet ownership. But Takagi isn't a typical customer. She's not there for feline affection, but to probe their minds. The quest for a user-friendly copyright regime began a decade ago when the Hong Kong government launched a public consultation on copyright protection in the digital environment in December 2006. Although this consultation initially sought to address internet-related challenges, such as those caused by peer-to-peer file-sharing technology, the reform effort quickly evolved into a more comprehensive digital upgrade of the Hong Kong copyright regime.
For any marketing course that requires development of marketing plan, such as marketing management, marketing strategy, and segmentation support marketing, this is the only planning handbook that guides students through the step-by-step creation of customized marketing plan, while offering commercial software to aid in the process.
It seems that language appeared from nowhere, since no other species has anything resembling human language. However, other animals do possess basic systems for perceiving and producing sounds that enable them to communicate. These systems may have been in place before the appearance of language. Clementson wanted to see if claims of question dodging actually held up, historically, not necessarily in the unique case of Trump. So Clementson analyzed the transcripts of 14 presidential debates from 1996 to 2012. Overall, he found 51 accusations of question dodging, 26 by Dems, 25 by Republicans. They controlled for the bird's age, sex, body size, and species, and they found that the hunted specimen's brains were actually 5% smaller, on average, than the brains of birds that died by other means. The surprising thing is that if you make a similar kind of analysis of liver or heart size, there is absolutely no difference there, so this is specific to the brain. Delone and MacLean's model has been criticized by some authors. Indeed, this model is specific to contexts of voluntary use of information technology. The usage variable remains a success variable of information systems if the user himself decides to adopt or reject the technology. However, for mandatory uses, such as for ERP systems, the use of the technology is obvious. The success of information systems cannot, therefore, be measured by usage. Since its inception, the UN system has been working to ensure adequate food for all through sustainable agriculture. The majority of the world's poorest people live in rural areas of developing countries. They depend on agriculture and related activities for their livelihoods. This makes them particularly vulnerable to man-made and natural influences that reduce agricultural production. For diplomacy, the starting point must be that globalization requires bridges and removes barriers. A policy of containment is a difficult strategy in the age of the fiber optic cable, the jumbo jet, and the satellite dish. There will always be the exception, such as the murderous regime in Iraq, where the only safe strategy is to keep it in the isolation ward until it accepts the norms of international behavior, or the military dictatorship in Burma, which has persistently failed to respond to dialogue. It takes two to critically engage. This book is no ordinary book, and should not be read through from beginning to end. It contains many different adventures, and the path you take will depend on the choices you make along the way. The success or failure of your mission will depend on the decisions you make, so think carefully before choosing. Long isolated from Western Europe, Russia grew up without participating in the development like the Reformation that many Russians taking pride in their unique culture find dubious value. Russia is, as a result, the most unusual member of the European family, if indeed it is European at all. The question is still open to debate, particularly among Russians themselves.
Public demand for education has remained strong, reflecting the importance of education as a means of social progress. Aware of the social value of education to the world of the work, the government continues to innovate and update the education system in order to produce a qualified and competent workforce.
Two sisters were at a dinner party when the conversation turned to upbringing. The elder sister started to say that her parents had been very strict and that she had been rather frightened of them. Her sister, younger by 2 years, interrupted in amazement. "What are you talking about?" she said. "Our parents were very lenient." The semiconductor industry has been able to improve the performance of electronic systems for more than 4 decades by making ever smaller devices. However, this approach will soon encounter both scientific and technical limits, which is why the industry is exploring a number of alternative device technologies. Social media are playing an increasingly important role as information sources for travelers. The goal of this study is to investigate the extent to which social media appear in search engine results in the context of travel-related searches. It also provides evidence for challenges faced by traditional providers of travel-related information. The grid-based infrastructure enables large-scale scientific applications to be run on distributed resources. However, in practice, grid resources are not very easy to use for the end users, who have to learn how to generate security credentials. There is an imminent need to provide transparent access to these resources so that the end users are shielded from the complicated details. Hundreds of millions of American people eat fast food every day without giving it too much thought, unaware of the subtle and not so subtle ramifications of their purchases. They just grab their tray off the counter, find a table, take a seat, unwrap the paper, and dig in. The whole experience is transitory and soon forgotten.
Internal combustion engine enables the driver to decide which source of power is appropriate for the travel requirements of a given journey. Major US auto manufacturers are now developing feasible hybrid electric vehicles, and some are exploring fuel cell technology for their electric cars.
It seems that, when it comes to love, men and women are designed to misconstrue, misread, and misunderstand one another and themselves. You discover that, in fact, they make good sense. Being a deluded romantic is often the best way to make a good, biologically successful choice about a potential partner on the basis. Scientists know little about how exactly it works, especially when it comes to complex functions like memory formation. Research is more advanced in animals, but experiments on humans are hard. Yet, even today, some parts of the brain, like the motor cortex, are better understood. Nor is complete knowledge always needed. Machine learning can recognize patterns of neural activity. The brain itself gets the hang of controlling BCIS with extraordinary ease. And neurotechnology will reveal more of the brain's secrets. This year, the National Environmental Science Competition received excellent undergraduate and postgraduate entries from all across the country, with a wide range of projects. We are delighted that our awards are encouraging, exciting, and valuable projects that go beyond research and analysis to develop solutions for a number of key problems. Information about the shortlisted projects will be posted on our website in the first week in June. First-year university students have designed and built a groundbreaking electric car that recharges itself. 50 students from the University of Sydney's Faculty of Engineering spent 5 months cobbling together bits of plywood, foam, and fiberglass to build the Mango concept car. They developed the specifications and hand-built the car. It's a pretty radical design of 4-wheel drive, with a motor in each wheel. The provision of accurate and authoritative statistical information strengthens modern societies. It provides a basis for decisions to be made on such things as where to open schools and hospitals, how much money to spend on welfare payments, and even which football players to replace at halftime. Fence, humanly erected barrier between two divisions of land, used to mark a legal or other boundary, to keep animals or people in or out, and sometimes as an ornament. In newly settled lands, fences are usually made of materials at hand, for example, stone, earth, or wood.
C. Northcote Parkinson, a British writer, formulated Parkinson's rule. Work expends to fill the time allotted to it, or conversely, the amount of work completed is in inverse proportion to the number of people employed. Simply said, if you have an hour to do a 5-minute job, it will take an hour to do it. A large number of people accomplish less work than a smaller number of people.
Shrimp farmers used to hold animals in nursery ponds for 30 to 60 days. Now they try to move them into grow-out ponds in less than 30 days. This reduces stress on the animals and dramatically increases survivals in the grow-out ponds. Many farms that abandon nursery ponds have gone back to them, and the results have been surprisingly positive. They're using the old, uncovered, earthen nursery ponds. The next wave of leaders in industrial manufacturing will build an ecosystem that capitalizes on the promise of analytics and connectivity to maximize efficiency for themselves and their customers. They will map out their strategies and prioritize measures that will bring the most value to their business, starting now with pilot projects and building greater strengths in data analytics with cross-functional teams of experts. The elephant is the largest living land mammal. During evolution, its skeleton has greatly altered from the usual mammal, designed for two main reasons. One is to cope with the great weight of huge grinding cheek teeth and elongated tusk, making the skull particularly massive. The other is to support the enormous bulk of such a huge body. Business school admissions officers said the new drive to attract younger students was in part the result of a realization that they had inadvertently limited their applicant pool by requiring several years' work experience. Talented students who might otherwise have gone to business school instead opted for a law or policy degree because they were intimidated by the expectation of work experience. A hazard assessment should be performed for work involving distillations of organic liquids and should thoroughly address issues relating to residual water and possible decomposition of the solvent in question, as well as the physical placement of the distillation apparatus and heating equipment to be employed.
Orientalists, like many other 19th century thinkers, conceive of humanity either in large collective terms or in abstract generalities. Orientalists are neither interested in nor capable of discussing individuals. Instead, artificial entities predominate. Similarly, the age-old distinction between Europe and Asia, or Occident and Orient, hides beneath very wide labels every possible variety of human plurality, reducing it in the process to one or two terminal collective realities.
Researchers have found that divorce has different kinds of negative impacts on the planet, including higher demand for resources and a lower rate of efficiency in the use of household resources. People have been talking about how to protect the environment and combat climate change, but divorce is an overlooked factor that needs to be considered.
Training to become an actor is an intensive process which requires curiosity, courage, and commitment. You'll learn how to prepare for rehearsal, how to rehearse, and how to use independent and proactive processes to achieve your best work possible for stage and screen.
Globalization has affected what we eat in ways we are only beginning to understand. Modern food production no longer relates to our biological needs, but is in direct conflict with them. The relationship between diet and our fertility, our risk of cancer, heart disease, and mental illness is becoming clearer. Yet, much of our food is nutritionally bankrupt.
The department determines whether or not the candidate has passed the examination. In cases where an appearance for the final public oral examination would constitute a substantial financial hardship for the candidate, the Director of Graduate Studies may recommend to the Dean of the graduate school that the examination be waived. Companies will want to be known not just for the financial results they generate, but equally for the imprint they leave on society as a whole. First, ensuring that their products contribute positively. Second, operating in a way that approaches a net neutral impact to the natural environment. And third, cherishing their people.
When we recycle, used materials are converted into new products, reducing the need to consume natural resources. If used materials are not recycled, new products are made by extracting fresh, raw material from the earth through mining and forestry. Recycling helps conserve important raw materials and protects natural habitats for the future.
The Japanese tea ceremony is a ritual tour influenced by Buddhism, in which green tea is prepared and served to a small group of guests in a peaceful setting. The ceremony can take as long as 4 hours, and there are many traditional gestures that both the server and the guests must perform. Imagine living all your life as the only family on your street. Then, one morning, you open the front door and discover houses all around you. You see neighbors tending their gardens and children walking to school. Where did all the people come from? What if the answer turned out to be that they had always been there, you just hadn't seen them?
Australians speak English, of course, but for many tourists and even some locals, Australian English has only tenuous links with mother tongue. Our speech is prepared with words and phrases whose arcane meanings are understood only by the initiate. It is these colorful colloquialisms that Australian slang set to truly explain.
The maximum yield of plants, determined by their genetic potential, is seldom achieved because factors such as insufficient water or nutrients, adverse climate conditions, plant diseases, and insect damage will limit growth at some stage. Plants subjected to these biotic and abiotic constraints are said to be stressed.
You used to think that being green was a luxury for your company, but climate change has made you realize that you can no longer ignore it. The buzz is about becoming carbon neutral. But where do you start? Consider your drivers. Do you want to become carbon neutral for marketing reasons, for financial reasons, or to help save the planet?
Before the discovery of Australia, people in the Old World were convinced that all swans were white, an unassailable belief, as it seemed completely confirmed by empirical evidence. The sighting of the first black swan might have been an interesting surprise for a few scientists, but that is not where the significance of the story lies.
Therefore, the working unions in modern society are not very important. They preserve their functions only in the underdeveloped countries. On the contrary, in the developed states, workers refuse to join the unions, preferring individual work. Thus, working unions cannot survive the assault of modern economic trends and slowly move to a complete decline. Their initial purposes have little to do with the hectic pace of modern life.
To work effectively with the heterogeneous student populations found in our schools, educators have the responsibility of acknowledging the cultural backgrounds of their students and the cultural setting in which the school is located in order to develop effective instructional strategies. The emergence of information technology has created new products, processes, and distribution systems. New products include the computer, the internet, and digital TV. New processes include internet banking, automated inventory control, and automated teller machines. And new distribution systems include cable and satellite TV. Investigators also compared those microbes with those living in 52 other soil samples taken from all around the planet. The park had organisms that also exist in deserts, frozen tundra, forests, rainforests, and prairies. Antarctica was the only area that had microbes that did not overlap with those found in Central Park. Only a small percentage of the park's microbes were found to be already listed in databases. Although introvert and extrovert personality types differ from one another on various grounds, the major difference between the two is their source of rejuvenation. While for extroverts, this may mean interaction or excursions with friends and family, the same may mean reading a book or listening to music for introverts. A constellation is an area on the celestial sphere in which a group of stars forms an imaginary outline or pattern, typically representing an animal, mythological person or creature, or an inanimate object. The origins of the earliest constellations likely go back to prehistory. Closure activities allow participants to consolidate learning, say goodbye to group mates, and attend to any unfinished business prior to the ending of the group experience. Generally, these activities involve some reflection upon what has been learned or accomplished during the preceding time together, and a sharing of those thoughts or insights with other participants. This is an extremely useful resource which ranks books and academic papers on the subject not only in terms of their reliability, but also their readability. As a result, it is likely to save students time and effort that would otherwise have been spent working through a lot of dense texts before finding the one they really need. This course provides an introduction to the history and development of the British legal system. Its aim is to describe the evolution of the common law of England, the legal system of England, and to introduce you to the study of constitutions as law and to the legal aspects of constitutional systems of government. Credit unions are non-profit organizations that were imported to the United States from Germany in the early 1900s. They were regulated in 1934 by the Federal Credit Union Act, which limits membership to groups having a common bond of occupation or association. Groups from particular geographical areas also were eligible to join credit unions. We all know about bacteria, viruses, and microscopic protozoa. We can watch the way that these tiny agents move into our bodies and damage our organs. We have a growing understanding of how our body mounts defensive strategies that fight off these invaders, and have built some clever chemical that can help mount an assault on these biovillains. There are two main types of market research. Quantitative research involves collecting a lot of information by using techniques such as questionnaires and other forms of survey. Qualitative research involves working with smaller samples of consumers, often asking them to discuss products and services while researchers take notes about what they have to say. The fact is that those different types of services affect many different dimensions of well-being of people, and defining the human well-being is also extremely challenging. However, we identified that there are certain items providing basic material for life, whether it is food, shelter, or happiness. There is a tendency, especially in the popular press, to concentrate on the negative effects of immigration. In that context, this lecture listing the benefits it brings to more developed nations is much more welcome. Also, it is delivered in a lively and amusing style. Today, telecommunication is widespread, and devices that assist the progress are common in many parts of the world. There is also a vast array of networks that connect these devices, including computer, telephone, and cable networks. Computer communication across the Internet, such as email and instant messaging, is just one of many examples of telecommunication. Current policy responses do not address the fundamental question of why so many mass shootings take place in schools. To answer this question, we need to get to the heart of how students experience school and the meaning that schools have in American life. While some of these measures seem sensible, overall there is little empirical evidence that such security measures decrease the likelihood of school shootings. For the designers and engineers who spend years crafting Team USA's uniforms to offer both style and extraordinary aerodynamics, the need to keep athletes warm in these extreme temperatures posed an added dimension of difficulty. Research on motivation has suggested that a strong sense of autonomy is the key to developing the healthy self-motivation that allows children and teens to pursue their goals with passion and to enjoy their achievements. But what we see in many of the kids we test or tutor is motivational patterns that are at the extremes of 1, an obsessive drive to succeed, and 2, seeing little point in working hard. Hopefully, this will treat and prevent acne and other skin diseases and reduce antibiotic use. Naked Biome is entering clinical trials to see if its approach is safe and effective. Roughly 1 million sexually transmitted infections are exchanged each day. If untreated, they can lead to cervical cancer, pelvic inflammatory disease, and infertility. However, people are often reluctant to ask their doctors to test for such infections, so Eve Medical in Toronto developed a kit for women to screen themselves. Normally, if we spin around in an office chair and suddenly stop, we feel like we're still moving. That's because fluid in the inner ear, responsible for detecting movement, continues to whirl around due to inertia, making your brain think it's still in motion. This flu season is a particularly severe one, and it's not over yet. Health officials say flu activity will likely remain elevated for at least several more weeks. But if you already caught the flu, are you in the clear for the rest of the season? When we put toast in the toaster or add marshmallows to the top of our sweet potatoes for a baked holiday dish, we expected them to turn brown and to develop a sweet caramelized flavor. Although we expect it to happen, do you know why certain foods take on these new colors and flavors as they are toasted? Scientists have recommended actions the government of Madagascar's recently elected president, André Rajoelina, should take to turn around the precipitous decline of biodiversity and help put Madagascar on a trajectory towards sustainable growth. Madagascar's protected areas, some of the most important for biodiversity in the world, have suffered terribly in recent years from illegal mining, logging, and collection of threatened species for the pet trade. Injury or disease that afflicts a relatively small number of brain cells causes a chain reaction that stops activity across a vast network of neural circuits, according to new research. The study may help to explain why people can suffer from temporary but severe loss of cognitive function in cases of traumatic brain injury or disease. New research identifies a process that might have been key in producing the first organic molecules on Earth about 4 billion years ago, before the origin of life. The process, which is similar to what might have occurred in some ancient underwater hydrothermal vents, may also have relevance to the search for life elsewhere in the universe. The power of the sun, wind, and sea may soon combine to produce clean-burning hydrogen fuel, according to researchers. A team integrated water purification technology into a new proof-of-concept design for a seawater electrolyzer, which uses an electric current to split apart the hydrogen and oxygen in water molecules. University of Adelaide researchers have uncovered fundamental new information about the malting characteristics of barley grains. They say their finding could pave the way to more stable brewing processes or new malts for craft brewers. Published in the Nature publication Scientific Reports, the researchers discovered a new link between one of the key enzymes involved in malt production for brewing and a specific tissue layer within the barley grain. Researchers have found a way to convert the aromatic substance vanillin into a redox active electrolyte material for liquid batteries. the technology is an important step towards ecologically sustainable energy storage. Using an X-ray laser, a research team has investigated how water heats up under extreme conditions. In the process, the scientists were able to observe water that remained liquid even at temperatures of more than 170 degrees Celsius. The investigation revealed an anomalous dynamic behavior of water, which is of fundamental importance for the analysis of sensitive samples using X-ray lasers. European wildcats, thought to be extinct 50 or so years ago in the Jura Mountains, have since recolonized part of their former territory. This resurgence in an area occupied by domestic cats has gone hand in hand with genetic crosses between the two species. A team of biologists modeled the interactions between the two species to predict that hybridization will entail the irreversible genetic replacement of wildcats. The slight decline in drug overdose deaths in 2018 coincides with Chinese regulations on the powerful opioid carfentanil, rather than the result of domestic U.S. efforts to curb the epidemic, a new analysis reveals. What many, including President Donald Trump, perceived as a decline in overdose deaths in 2018 appears to be a return to the historic exponential curve. Deaf children learning a sign language could certainly pursue the development of listening and spoken language skills, if desired, and doing so would carry much less risk, knowing the child would have mastery in at least one language. If a child does not succeed in mastering either a spoken language or a sign language, we must then ask how much benefit the child derived from interventions in each language, relative to the amount of time and resources dedicated to those interventions. The terms summary and abstract are often used interchangeably, resulting in some confusion. This problem arises because there are two distinct types of abstracts, descriptive and informative. The informative abstract is another name for a summary. The descriptive is not. The descriptive abstract is usually only 2 or 3 sentences in length. Hence it is not a summary, or very informative. Prolonged exposure to loud noise alters how the brain processes speech, potentially increasing the difficulty in distinguishing speech sounds, according to neuroscientists. Exposure to intensely loud sounds leads to permanent damage of the hair cells, which act as sound receivers in the ear. Once damaged, the hair cells do not grow back, leading to noise-induced hearing loss. We understand the importance of supporting and restoring biodiversity, and we are teaming up with the world's leading molecular biologists, technologists, conservation biologists, conservation organizations, ethicists, and thought leaders to call for intended consequences to help us safely use all of the available tools that can provide the advantage we need to turn the tide on species loss. Surgical site infections are caused by bacteria that get in through incisions made during surgery. They threaten the lives of millions of patients each year and contribute to the spread of antibiotic resistance. In low and middle income countries, 11% of patients who undergo surgery are infected in the process. The scientists say this is the first documented instance of nectar that attracts a particular animal assistant being produced outside of a nectary. In fact, the observed nectar bleeding might actually be an early system that evolved to include the nectaries found in other plants today. The sad truth is that happy sounds are infectious. Now comes research that at least partly explains why. It was published this week in the Journal of Neuroscience. a British research team played various sounds including laughter to people who are having their brain scanned by a functional MRI machine. All the sounds activated the premotor cortical region of the brain, an area preparing facial muscles to move. Aboriginal people are believed to have arrived as early as 60,000 years ago, and evidence of Aboriginal art in Australia dates back at least 30,000 years. Several states and territories had their origins as penal colonies, with the first British convicts arriving at Sydney Cove in 1788. Tasmania is a large and relatively sparsely populated island off the south coast of Australia. The island is of particular interest to natural scientists who go there to research the unique wildlife. Tasmania has, for example, 12 species of bird that are not found anywhere else in the world. The transition from the brick-and-mortar structure to click-and-order model started with the emergence of information technology and its use in the financial sector. The use of technology in banking has resulted in availability of multiple delivery channels like ATMs, telebanking, internet banking, and mobile banking. A study found that the research funded by the soft drinks industry had different results from research funded by other sources, and went on to suggest that they may have been biased by the research itself. The whole point of the scientific methods is to ensure the research results are not influenced by the source of funding. As we progress into the 21st century, communications are becoming faster and faster. Think of the millions of different media images you are bombarded with every day. It is as important now to be able to read and make sense of those images as it has been to be able to read ordinary text. As introverts are thinking, they reach back into long-term memory to locate information. An introvert will often compare old and new experiences when making a decision, which slows the processing down, but leads to carefully thought-out decisions. This means that introverts have an active dialogue with themselves and usually walk around with many thoughts in their minds. In 1861, Matthew Brady, a well-known portrait photographer, approached President Lincoln requesting permission to move freely around the country, photographing the Civil War. Lincoln granted him permission to travel anywhere with the Union armies, and his record of this conflict brought home to millions the horrors of war. The Southerners did not accept Lincoln as a president because of certain reasons, based on historical grounds. Southerners wished to protect their rights in the government and become more independent from the North. They considered president elections to be unfair. Moreover, they thought that their own rights will be ignored and limited. All this caused the separation of the southern states and marked the beginning of the Civil War. Previous research has offered circumstantial evidence that Ganymede, the largest moon in the solar system, contains more water than all of Earth's oceans put together. However, temperatures there are so cold that the water on the surface is frozen solid. Also, Ganymede's ocean is thought to be 100 miles below the moon's crust. This means that the water vapor discovered by Hubble is not likely to represent the evaporation of this ocean. A ubiquitous neurotransmitter that carries signals between brain cells, dopamine, among its many functions, is involved in multiple aspects of cognitive processing. The chemical messenger has been extensively studied from the perspective of external cues or deterministic signals. Over time, a split would have appeared in wolf populations, he says, those wolves that feared humans and those that didn't. So this would have facilitated, I think, the domestication process, at which point humans deliberately took wolves as pets. But that domestication process, France says, may have happened more than once, first in the West, in Europe, and again in the Far East, in Asia. Nell says that, in order to seek protection from their furry foes, birds actually prefer to build their nests in plots of swamp with a resident alligator. In fact, in one study, a graduate student planted fake alligators. The birds seem to prefer to build nests close to them. Where there's a water source, there are alligators. So it's sort of this mode of protection around these colonies. History is selective. What history books tell us about the past is not everything that happened, but what historians have selected. They cannot put in everything. Choices have to be made. Choices must similarly be made about which aspects of the past should be formally taught to the next generation in the shape of school history lessons. An economic depression is a period of sustained, long-term downturn in economic activity in one or more economies. It is more severe than a recession, which is a slowdown in economic activity over the course of a normal business cycle. Economic depressions are characterized by their length and by abnormally large increases in unemployment rate. The speaker reminisces about his views of the English Revolution when he was a student and how it seemed quite clear which side he was on, the aristocrats, not the Puritans. Later he realized there was more to it than that, and there were several ways of interpreting the revolution as a struggle between the king and the parliament, as a class war, or as an unpredictable situation without clear sides. The survey found that the statistical chances of someone from a poor background being accepted at one of the country's most respected universities are far lower than those of a student from a wealthy family. This means that the inequalities in society are likely to be passed down from one generation to the next. Despite a number of events in recent years devoted to language diversity, language endangerment, and multilingualism, such as the International Year of Languages, public awareness of the issues is still remarkably limited. Only 1 in 4 of the population know that half the languages of the world are so seriously endangered that they are unlikely to survive the present century. Nature offers no greater splendor than the starry sky on a clear, dark night. Silent, timeless, jeweled with the constellations of ancient myth and legend, the night sky has inspired wonder throughout the ages. A wonder that leads our imaginations far from the confines of Earth and the pace of present day, out into boundless space and cosmic time itself. Summerhill School was regarded with considerable suspicion by the educational establishment. Lessons were optional for pupils at the school, and the government of the school was carried out by a school council, of which all the pupils and staff were members, with everyone having equal voting rights. While advances in agricultural science have always been critical to ensuring we help feed the world, its impact and importance is even greater now as population grows at a rapid rate and the availability of arable land steadily declines. Science and technology solutions are essential to meeting growing demand for food, maintaining market competitiveness, and adapting to land mitigating risks. The benefits and disadvantages of globalization are the subject of ongoing debate. The downside to globalization can be seen in the increased risk for the transmission of diseases. Globalization has, of course, led to great good, too. Richer nations now can come to the aid of poorer nations in crisis. Increasing diversity in many countries has meant more opportunity to learn about and celebrate other cultures. It's time for this young loggerhead turtle to go to work. We can tether turtles in these little cloth harnesses, put them into this tank and dull swimming place. University of North Carolina biologist Ken Lohman studies sea turtles that are programmed from birth for an extraordinary journey. Mother turtles buried the eggs on the beach and then returned to the sea, and the eggs hatch about 50 to 60 days later. Behavioral and social sciences research helps predict, prevent, and manage illness in individuals and in whole populations. This research also helps people change their behaviors, understand treatments, and learn how to stick with them. Society's role is significant, too. Access to health care affects decision-making and behavior. Scholars build their own personal libraries to support not only particular projects, but also general reading in their field. They buy or make photocopies of materials when possible, so they can consult them frequently, mark pages and write annotation on them. When moving into a new field, they add to their collections, usually concentrating on primary texts. There were two types of soldier in the Roman army, the Roman legionary and the auxiliaries. The legionaries were the very best soldiers, and the auxiliaries were actually non-Roman citizens. Legionaries wore an undershirt made of linen and a woolen tunic. The linen helped the soldiers to stay cool, while the wool helped to trap heat, keeping the soldiers warm.
Lincoln's apparently radical change of mind about his war power to emancipate slaves was caused by the escalating scope of war, which convinced him that any measure to weaken the Confederacy and strengthen the Union war effort was justifiable as a military necessity.
A young man from a small provincial town, a man without independent wealth, without powerful family connections, and without a university education, moved to London in the late 50s and, in a remarkably short time, became the greatest playwright not of his age alone, but of all time. How was this achievement of magnitude made? How did Shakespeare become Shakespeare? Tesla actually worked for Edison early in his career. Edison offered to pay him the modern equivalent of $1 million to fix the problems he was having with his DC generators and motors. Tesla fixed Edison's machines, and when he asked for the money he was promised, Edison laughed him off and had this to say, "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor."
Akimbo. This must be one of the odder-looking words in the language, and puzzles us in part because it doesn't seem to have any relatives. What's more, it is now virtually a fossil word, until recently almost invariably found in arms akimbo, a posture in which a person stands with hands on hips and elbows sharply bent outward, one signaling impatience, hostility, or contempt. The Grand Canyon is 277 miles long, up to 18 miles wide, and a tensor depth of over a mile. While the specific geologic processes and timing that form the Grand Canyon are the subject of debate by geologists, recent evidence suggests the Colorado River established its course through the canyon at least 17 million years ago.
The problem begins with the alphabet itself, building a spelling system for English, using letters that come from Latin, despite the two languages not sharing exactly the same set of sounds, is like building a playroom using an IKEA office set.
Modern buildings have to achieve certain performance requirements, at least to satisfy those of building codes, to provide a safe, healthy, and comfortable environment. However, these conditioned environments demand resources in energy and materials, which are both limited in supply, to build and operate. This finding is understandable in certain cases, in spite of its high significance. That is because energy efficiency of building operation just represents a single aspect of sustainability.
In the fast-changing world of modern healthcare, the job of a doctor is more and more like the job of chief executive. The people who run hospitals and physicians' practices don't just need to know medicine. They must also be able to balance budgets, motivate a large and diverse staff, and make difficult marketing and legal decisions.
Cheerful sunny yellow is an attention getter, while it is considered an optimistic color. People lose their tempers more often in yellow rooms, and babies will cry more. It is the most difficult color for the eye to take in, so it can be overpowering if overused. Yellow enhances concentration, hence its use for legal paths. It also speeds metabolism.